if you're planting this stuff, it's like 2/3 the same. So even if you're like, well, we're not going to do multi-site, it's pretty similar how you launch a campus and how you launch a church. And basically, they're both church, but one's like its own church and one's a church that's part of a larger church. But to the people that are coming to it, it's just church. They don't think of it as anything other than the church in their town. So we're going to take the full time on that, and we won't do ministry time this morning. I do have some things on the web that I want to call your attention to. First of all, I've got a website just called smallgroupsbigimpact.com, and that, as you can tell, that's just about small groups and how do you make small groups just work long-term in a way that multiplies growth, multiplies leadership. But then I have a blog, and on the blog this week, I put up a bunch of free multi-site resources, more than we could have afforded to photocopy and put in your handbook or notebook. So, you can just, the ones that were Microsoft Word documents, I just put up there in Microsoft Word. So you can just take those and modify them. You don't need to say where you got them from. That's just stuff that we stole from other churches anyway, okay? So, it's just a matter of helping each other out here, and the church, all the churches in this movement are very generous, and we're all just kind of forging new ground. So anyway, I put a bunch of stuff up there, maybe a dozen different resources, and even things like job descriptions and stuff. And that is at smallgroupsbigimpact.wordpress.com. If you go to that blog, it's a WordPress blog, there's several tabs across the top. And one of the tabs is multi-site. And basically that's just a page of free downloads. There's another tab that's up there that's just icebreakers. I'm trying to get the world's best icebreakers. So if you like small group icebreakers, there's about 100 up there, and we put about 5 new ones up each week. A lot of my books are published by Touch Publications. So like the New Believers material, I think, is there anything left at the book table? Just the Breakthrough. So the only thing left there is the Spiritual Growth Campaign thing called Breakthrough, which is actually published by Ampelon, which is a Vineyard publisher. But most of my books on small groups and discipleship are published by Touch Publications, which is touchusa.org. It's not .com. I got it wrong there. It's .org, okay? And I'm doing some free webinars on small groups for church teams in next week in May and in June. And that's the church team's webinar website. And they've got other webinars going on. But if you go there, the ones that I'm doing say Jim Agliano, okay? They say SGBI, which is Small Groups Big Impact. But anyway, you feel free to sign up for those. They're 1-hour webinars just on small group ministry. So they're 1-hour webinars on what makes small groups grow. So what I'm going to do this morning is I'm just going to share the story of these 3 launches that we've done. And then I'm going to talk about leadership, because this is all about leadership. And in particular, I want to talk about what kind of leader is right for leading a campus of a multi-site church, and what kind of leader is right for planting a church. And these are both, I want as many of both of those as possible. Then we'll talk about how do the different pieces of a multi-site church fit together. So this is our story. We launched our first campus in Sullivan, Illinois It's about 50 miles south of Urbana. Actually, a little, I think last time I drove down there, I was like, oh man, this is 55 miles. But what happened there was a young couple named Jim and Lori Plank, about 15 years ago, started coming to the vineyard, like driving 50 miles each direction to come to the vineyard. And then they started a small group there. It was just, they weren't like, we're going to start a church here. They're just like, we're tired of driving 45 miles to the closest small group. Let's start our own small group. And they had some two friends that started coming, another young couple started coming. For a year and a half, it was 4 people. Occasionally another person or two would come. One day, Jim's boss, Glenn, said, this is the importance of connectors. Glenn said, hey, I think I'll come to your small group tonight. Would that be okay? Jim's like, that would be great. You wouldn't know Glenn was a connector if you just met Glenn. You wouldn't know. He's just kind of quiet, just owns a concrete company. And Jim was his estimator for concrete jobs. But immediately Glenn said, can I bring some friends? I mean, that's a connector. He's not even going to come the first time without bringing some friends. Glenn brought friends. Glenn's friends brought friends. Pretty soon, 40 people are coming to Jim's small group. We moved it. This other young couple that's coming, they're like, well, our dad owns a restaurant. Let's move it to the restaurant. 45 people are coming to Jim's small group. Then I'm like, Jim, we do learning to minister like Jesus, which is the 5-step prayer model. And then I'm like, Jim, let's just do small group leader training when we finish this, So we get like 15 people come to small group leader training, and we multiply that small group 4 ways. And we taught, there was a church building for sale in a neighboring town, and we had a couple false starts. We're like, should we start? That wasn't the right town, it wasn't the right place. And, but then again, we started thinking multi-site and reading the books, going to the conferences. And in this building that you see in the picture, this is a furniture store, coffee shop on the square across from the courthouse in Sullivan. And it's called the Coffee Bean, just kind of a funky coffee shop there. In May of 2008, we had an interest meeting. 35 people come to the interest meeting. We had more people than that coming on weekends up to our worship services, but only 35 were really interested in making something happen. But they could tell, we were serious. Jim was serious. And in January, one of the, we're like maybe a year from this fall. And when we say when we were saying a year from this fall, people were like, a year from this fall? Most people are not very patient. I mean, why are you even talking about it now if it's a year from this fall? But then in January, one of those people came and said, I sold a building last year and I need to reinvest that money or I'll have to pay taxes on it. How about if I build a building and rent it to you, and that can be the new church building? And there's 3 times a year. This doesn't matter for church planning or launching a new campus. There's 3 times a year you can do this. You can do it Easter time. You can do it in the fall, or you can do it in January. Those are your 3 windows, right? Those are your optimal times. You don't want to start, July 1st or something, You want to pick some high attendance time. So we're like, do we launch this spring? And we had to decide. We had to decide right then. And we're like, okay, we're going to launch 2 weeks before Easter. So this works. 2 weeks before Easter. Because you do it 2 weeks before, people are going to come. It's like a big thing in a small town. People are going to come. What's going on? You do a hog roast the next Sunday, and the next Sunday's Easter. So for 3 weeks in a row, how long does it take to form a new habit? 3 weeks. So for 3 weeks in a row, other multi-site churches had said this is what you do. The 4th week comes and the kids are already dressed, They're already like, we're going to church today, right? So we did that. One funny part of the story was we just had terrible video when it started. We bought the $79 DVD player. We're a week, this is the way it works for us. A lot of multi-site churches don't do video. It's actually 50-50. A lot don't use video. They use a live speaker preaching the same outline as the other campus. We're not that far ahead. We don't, you have to prepare your sermons a couple weeks out because you got to get in sync. You can't hand them a sermon outline a few days ahead of time, which is when our sermons tend to get done. So anyway, I don't know, we're just not that organized, and a lot of churches do it by video, and we do it 1 week till it just solves all these complications. But we bought the $79 DVD player, and for the first month, the words, the sound was not in sync. The lips were not in sync with the audio, and the lips were not in sync. I went down there and I'm like, people are coming back, And we after a couple months, we bought a $400 DVD player, and that fixed it. So there's places to save money, but it's not in the DVD player. But I wanted to tell you what went into that build-up. When they, after that interest meeting, we created a website. We put the website on anything we passed out. If we're passing out hot chocolate, it's www. Sullivan Vineyard, or I think it was just Sullivan. There was maybe already a Sullivan Vineyard somewhere in the States. We had to Vineyard Sullivan, or I forget how we did it, but we got our own URL, and they start doing kindness outreaches, they start doing hayrack rides, and just stuff to pull people together. But and again, it's easier to get people's attention in a small town. Then we in those 4 weeks leading up to the launch, we did 5 postcards to every home in the community. 1 postcard a week for 3 weeks, and the fourth week, 2 postcards. The pictures on the postcards were pictures that we had taken in that community. They were not from iStockPhoto.com. And you can buy these addresses. It costs $1 a home. We spent $6,000 to hit 6,000 homes. You get a 1% return. So let's do the math. 6,000 postcards, how many people are going to show up that first week? 60 people. And we were really surprised. I think it works better in small towns because that's about what we got that week. I mean, there were over 300 people that first week. And probably about 60 of them were from the postcards. But I don't think you get this in a larger town or suburbia, but people came for months afterwards. They didn't come that first week. And we're like, how'd you hear about us? I got a postcard. And it was really amazing. You get a few people calling you like, quit sending me postcards. Then you know that you're like, you're hitting it, you know? But there were people that said things like, I've been praying about where to go back to church, and this postcard came. I mean, they took that as that was God answering my prayer. And it was. It was God answering their prayer for a church that they and their family could relate to. Yeah, so basically, you know, how would you summarize those first few weeks? Video problems, great worship, and great kids ministry. There were ups and downs, you know, there's like 320 people there the first Sunday, then there's like 220, then, you know, things dipped down like 175, you know. But they've continued to, that's the building. That's our building in Sullivan. It's just a 60 by 90 metal building, like Morton building type building. But things have slowly grown since then. They're averaging over 400 people. This is 3 years. We're just 3 years into this. Easter Sunday, they had 600 people. 2 weeks ago, I saw Jim Wednesday. You know, I was curious, what was there the week after Easter? He said we have 499 just this past Sunday. So that's their new building. That's where the building inspector just looked through the front door last week and said, everything looks fine. And I don't know, I don't know if it'll open July 1st. We'll probably move into it in July. So then, while that was taking place, while Jim's ramping up, in Danville, Illinois, we'd had our eyes on for years. Hap had probably talked to a dozen young people, trying to convince them to plant a vineyard in Danville. Like, we got people coming from Danville. It's 35 miles east of us. This is this depressed industrial community, extremely different than Champaign-Urbana. Can you get me a Kleenex? We'd have one small group there, then we'd have two small groups there, then we'd have 3 or 4 small groups there, then we'd have one small group there. You know, it just looked like nothing was happening there. Excuse me. But then the one small group that we had in Danville was led by Dennis and Pam Starkey. Dennis is in his 60s, insurance salesman, and they do Bruce Wilkinson's, the Prayer Jabez guy. They do his book, which I think is Bruce's least popular book, called The Dream Maker. And it's all about if you could do anything, what would you do? And it's about Joshua moving in, and there's these giants, but God's bigger than the giants, and they do this curriculum. And Dennis decides, if I could do anything, I'd start a vineyard in Danville. So Dennis comes to us and we're going to start, let's start a vineyard in Danville. And we're like, you want to pastor a vineyard in Danville? And he's like, no, I don't. I'm not going to pastor it. I'm just going to start it. We're like, who's going to pastor it? I don't know. We'll figure that out. That's Dennis. So Dennis, his wife works for a funeral home. He starts getting people. He moves this small group to the funeral home so that we can get more people going. We've got about 75 people coming from Danville. They don't know each other. You know, you get them together and they're like, I mean, some of them knew each other and they didn't know they were from the same town. They're like, you're from Danville? I didn't know you were from Danville. I thought you were from Champaign, you know. You know, I go over there to those interest meetings. There'd be like 17 people there sometimes. You know, Dennis is like, come over, do small group leader training. So all this time, we're ramping up. We're getting ready to go. I mean, this is just like crazy. You talk to other multi-site churches about this, and you know, you always start with your campus pastor. And Dennis is like, well, if we can't find somebody, I'll lead it for a little while, you know. And then Dennis is like, he finds Jay. He finds a burnout Nazarene pastor hiding in our church. Now, seriously. Showing up on Saturday night. I didn't know he was there. I'd never met him. He'd just come, sit in the back, kind of get healed up after he'd gotten beaten up. His wife had left him and you know, and a few years earlier, and actually the church had responded to that real graciously, but he just couldn't keep pastoring. And so Dennis is like, Jay's gonna lead the church, you know. And I mean, I start meeting with Jay for coffee every week, and we're just like, oh, this guy's Nazarene. He looks Nazarene. He feels Nazarene. And then Jay's like, okay, I'm not Vineyard. Just tell me what Vineyard is. Just tell me. You know, we're like, you don't feel Vineyard. You don't get it. You know, I mean, we're just like beating him up. And he's just, I mean, the poor guy, he's just like, just tell me what to do. Tell me how to act. Tell me what a Nazarene is so I cannot be one, you know. I mean, he's just like, and anyway, so, you know, Jay gets involved. Jay just works and works and works. Jay has just given probably thousands of hours to this. And what Jay had, and what Dennis had, and what Jay had that no one had was a passion for Danville, Illinois. I mean, they care. It is their town. I mean, they love Danville. I mean, I don't know how to put this. I mean, there's just not a lot to like about Danville. You know what I mean? It's just a rough and tumble town that used to have 10,000 more people than it has today. I mean, the city's just tearing down houses. The city's, right? I mean, there's too many houses there. You can buy a house cheaper in Danville than any place probably in the Midwest. You can buy big houses, huge houses for almost nothing. Anyway, this is the building we bought for $150,000. And I mean, it's as nice on the inside as it looks on the outside. So that launched in September of 2009, and then you know, again, there was like 300 there, and then there's 200 there, and then there's 170 there, but now the Danville Vineyard's averaging 275. It's strong financially. It struggled financially. It's not that well-to-do of a town. I mean, that whole county, the per capita income is way lower than our county. And then there was this outcry from our staff. And they were like, This is a lot of work. It is a lot of work. When you send out a church planning team, you lose people. It's no work. I mean, you lose people. You have to replace people. But it does not tax your staff. They just left, you know? But those are our churches. We don't have one kids ministry. We've got 3 kids ministries. We don't have one worship team. We've got 3 worship teams. We don't need one drummer on Sunday morning. We need 3 drummers on Sunday. You know, I've learned this. Drummers and bass players. That's what it's hard to find, right? There's plenty of guitar players and vocalists. And people were like, and you know, especially we launched this in the fall. Does your staff have anything to do in September? Does your tech people and your kids ministry people and the youth ministry people and the worship, do they have any? That is the craziest month of the year, right? And so they're like, I mean, they were like, I'm the small group pastor. This was not on my job description. I'm just passionate about it. I'm just getting these things started. It's not on my job description. I just get them started, hand them to Ben. And people are like, this was crazy. They weren't complaining that we started them. They were like, we did not have our act together. Kind of like, Jim, you should have figured this out before we did it. You should have, and I was like, don't worry about it. There's no more in the chute. And they, Hap's like, we're going to do 10 of these. And they're like, and I'm like, look, you're going to get a break. We're not going to I don't see any more of these starting for years. Because who's going to start one? And they're like, well, I don't know. I'm like, see, there's nobody in the chute. And the worship pastor, Jim Wood, Jim had just knocked himself out and really done an exceptional job. We have great worship at every campus, and Jim had just knocked himself out. But Jim lives 30 miles north of us, and I'm like, Jim, man, you ought to start one of these in Paxton. He's like, no way. This is what he and his wife said. We live in Paxton because it's cheap. We could buy a big house here for almost nothing. And they both said, we will never start a vineyard in Paxton. Well, then 2 things happened. Then Jim's going to these other campuses because they need a bass player, right? So Jim's, and the worship people are kind of rotating around and moving around and helping. And they're still doing that. And he's like, man, this is kind of cool. This is like this cool vibe at these other campuses. And people are coming to Jesus. People's lives are being changed. And then he starts, and we have several small groups in Paxton, none of which Jim goes to, okay? He starts a small group in Paxton, and it takes off. And they just love it. And somehow there's just dynamics going on there that just capture them. And I used to argue with Dee Dee, his wife, and I would say, you need friends, get in a small group. And she's like, Jim, that's not what people don't find friends in small groups. They experience the Holy Spirit in small groups, and they see these cool things that God does, but they don't make friends in small groups. And I'm like, Dee Dee, all my best friends I made in small groups. I'm like, you don't get it. So we're just talking, and she's actually part-time. She's one of my small group pastors part-time at that time, and we're just, and so she has a vision for small groups, but she has a different grid, and they start this small group, and it becomes their best friends. These other young families from Paxton, and all of a sudden, like, we're going to start a vineyard in Paxton in September. So they don't want to wait till Easter, right? And anyway, that was our easiest launch because we had people doing small groups in Paxton. And, you know, Jim Plank and Dennis and Jay worked very hard. But Jim and Dee Dee worked very hard also. But they also reaped where other people had sown. And there were leaders there already, and some small groups there already. We had 4 or 5 small groups there already. That's the front of their building. Their building really looks bad from the outside, doesn't it, Joel? But I mean, the whole downtown of Paxton does, so it just fits in. But inside, it looks very nice. This is a picture of the inside of their building. Different place, same DNA, you know, again, same feel in all these places. They have just an amazing kids ministry in Paxton. I mean, they're same curriculum, same format, but I don't know. They're just knock it out of the park with kids ministry in Paxton. And then a vineyard we planted 25 years ago in Bloomington. The pastor's like, I'm going on the mission field. Will you guys come and help us? And so we relaunched that. Vicki and I step in for a year. We're the interim pastors there, this is the way you would describe that. You know that, isn't that a movie, Honey, I Shrunk the Kids? This is like Vicki and I shrunk the Bloomington Vineyard. And I was actually just talking to Brian Zaire, a multi-site consultant from Community Christian Church in Chicago on Thursday, and we were actually it's after I arrived here. I had a phone appointment, called them after I'd arrived here in town, and we were talking about relaunching because they've adopted some churches, and this is what if somebody ever does this, like, could we be part of your church? I think probably you just close it down for several months and relaunch a new thing. We thought, well, we considered that, and we thought, no, there's some people here, there's some, but those people leave anyway, because you have to change everything to get them. There's a reason why, if that church isn't healthy, there's a reason why, and you have to change things. But when you change, the people that are coming actually like it the way it is, right? That's why they're coming. And then when you change it, they leave. So Vicki and I shrunk the church, and we relaunched it, and it's been very challenging. They had like 70 people there, and we shrunk it to like 35, and now they're up to 60. But the cool thing was, when we came there, and we did the all-church survey, like, how many of you didn't go to church before you came here? One person. 3% of that church. They have baptized more people this year, and there's people just coming that find in Jesus. They got the postcard, or their friend brought them, or whatever, and we connected to some connectors there who are bringing people that just are very different. And actually very different. This is in the fastest growing town in Illinois. And it's larger. That town is larger than our town. You know, we're like 100,000, they're like 125. They used to be smaller than us. They're larger than us now. It's the headquarters of State Farm Insurance, Country Companies Insurance. It's a white-collar town. And, but there's not a lot of this is kind of what's happening. There's not a lot of there's not multiracial blue-collar. I mean, there's some blue-collar churches there, but, we're reaching the down and outs that nobody else is reaching, and a vineyard is really needed in that town. But the pastors have a very big challenge. Now, next up is Charleston. Charleston is a very different situation than us in that what happened was a vineyard pastor from Syracuse, New York called us, Tim Wheeler, associate pastor at the Syracuse Vineyard Church, actually a multi-site church in Syracuse, New York. It's a church with, like, the main campus has like 700. They've started a new campus like with 120 in Auburn, New York. And Tim calls us and says, I mean, we never heard of him before. He's like, I'm from Illinois. And my dad died, and my grandma needs, so none of grandma's kids are alive. There's 2 grandchildren. And he's like, we need to move home to take care of grandma. So we're moving back to the family farm near Charleston. And I want to start a vineyard in Charleston. So we're like, great. What do you want to do? Do you want a church plant, or do you want to start a new campus? And it took him a while to decide. And he took some time with us, and he came out to some of our region's boot camps and stuff. And he's like, I want to start a campus. We did not have people to give him. You know, this is further away than any of our campuses. So this is like 60 miles away. And so he had never lived in Charleston. He had lived in Effingham, Illinois. He had not lived near the family farm. You know, he lived 30 miles south. So he's moving in. We don't have people to give to him. At the same time, this is not someone who we have to teach how to be a pastor. Another vineyard's he's already been part of a healthy, vibrant, growing vineyard. So Tim moved in. There's been 3 people that have joined him that live in between Charleston and Urbana. They live closer to Urbana, but they want to be a part of helping him there. And he's just started. I mean, we're doing Alpha, we're doing small groups. Happy's son, our senior pastor's son, is a linebacker at that university. So that helped. So Corey's gathering people. But then, unfortunately, Corey graduates. You know, Corey's not there anymore. You know, now Corey lives in Chicago. But I think we will do well there. I think we can get 200 people the first Sunday. Now, what's success there? I don't know. But this is what I want to communicate to you about this. I was talking to Jeff Heitkamp. He's the senior pastor of the Mercy Vineyard in Minneapolis. Jeff, you probably know Jeff from, he edits Cutting Edge magazine. So I was talking to Jeff about this. And Jeff told me church planters, he said, I'm trying to figure this out. Church planters, if a church planter leaves a large vineyard, they plant a larger church. And if they leave a smaller vineyard, they plant a smaller church. But he's like, the planter's not, you know, it's not like they're sending out a different type of person or a different quality of person. So he's like, I'm trying to figure this out. I'm like, okay, what are you concluding, Jeff? I want you to get this. He's like, I think that their church gets bigger because they expect it to get bigger. Change your expectation. And then he said, I think they get bigger because they've been a part of a bigger vineyard and they understand the importance of systems. you need a welcome team system. You need a children's church system. And he said, I learned those systems. And I took people with me that had seen those systems. But you can learn those systems. Even if you're leaving a church that did not have those systems, you can learn those systems. And you can change your expectation. Here's some of our learnings. I've mentioned these, so I won't. Quality's gone up. Evangelism has accelerated. I've already covered some of this in question and answers and stuff. Clear vision unites and compels. Ross was talking about this. Happy said, he articulated this, he put this in writing, he said this. And you put yourself on the line when you say these things. At the same time, it's free. It doesn't cost you any money to say, we're going to do this. It didn't cost anything, So, like Tim Wheeler knew, we were serious about this. We're going to plant churches. We're going to start new campuses. Next week, I've got a young woman coming to visit our church. Never met her. She's from the Chicago area. Somebody told her. She was part of the Oak Park Vineyard in Chicago. She did an internship there. She just finished seminary at Trinity Evangelical Divinity School in the Chicago area. And, somebody told her, check out the Urbana Vineyard, man. They need people. They're growing. They're starting churches there. Now, is she a good fit? I don't know. She'll spend a weekend with us, and she'll get a feel for this. Do I like this place? Does this feel like what I want to do? Should I come get involved here? I mean, we would not have a spot. She'd just have to come, get a job, get plugged in. Workers grow into a leadership role. Everything hinges on leadership. So this is in your notes. I think this was the next thing. Maybe it says session 3, because I didn't get to it yesterday. But I want to talk about, it doesn't matter if it's church planning or multi-site. It's just a leadership. So it's one purpose, 2 strategies. Multi-site does not diminish church planning. People have done research on this. Churches that do multi-site plant more churches than churches that aren't doing multi-site. Michael had a consultation. Was that just last month, Michael? Was that? Here in Columbus, and all the churches that are going to plant 10 churches in the next 10 years got together and were sharing ideas. And there were 12 churches there, and 10 of them already have another campus, at least one other campus. These are the churches saying we want to plant more churches too. So these things go together. The question is, what do you want to do? This is a question I ask people. What do you want to do? I mean, this is what I'll ask this young woman next weekend. And the pivotal question there is, is this person a church planner? Are they a campus pastor? Or maybe they're an associate pastor or whatever. This is what I want to know. Are they energized by preaching? And if they say, yeah, then I'm like, have you ever taught Alpha? And if they say, yeah, I'm like, how did you like that? Because if you teach Alpha, you got to teach somebody else's outline, right? You got to teach Nikki Gumbel's outline because it's in everybody's book, right? Actually, I love to do that. It's like Nikki came up with a great outline. I can adjust it. I can add my stories. But take Ben, who just left. He just left us last year, planting a church in Peoria, Illinois. He did not like teaching Nicky Gumbel's outline. That's why Ben's a church planner. He would not make a good multi-site pastor. You could have a multi-site pastor. Could we? We'd have to adjust some things in our preaching system. We'd have to get further ahead. We'd have to have a team of people working on sermons. The churches that use more live. This is how we do it. Okay, so we're typically a week behind. You can't be a week behind Easter, right? You can't be a week behind Christmas. So what we do is, in the weeks leading Advent and Lent, we don't call them Advent and Lent because we're a vineyard, but in the weeks leading up to Christmas and in the weeks leading up to Easter, we record the sermons midweek for use that week. And then the holiday itself is preached by that campus pastor, okay? Then, whenever we use a preaching team, Happy probably only preaches 40% of the time. And then Diane preaches some, and there's a couple other people on the preaching team. When Hap or Di are preaching, they always use the video, okay? Unless it's a holiday. But if someone else is preaching, let's just say the youth pastor's preaching. That youth pastor's, the campuses have no relationship with that youth pastor. Those are the Sundays when often we tell the campus pastors, you want to preach live? Or sometimes there's a specific topic that we want the campus pastor to preach live. If it's on reaching our community, like if the sermon's on reaching our community, we had a message on that about a month ago, that we want them to preach that live, because that's going to be different. Each community is going to be different. So they can preach basically 4 to 8 times a year. And it actually will vary, because sometimes they can use the video if they want to use the video, or they could preach live. You have to learn this. This takes adjustments to your system. For example, you can't say, wasn't that an amazing Illini game last night? You can't say that if it's going to be shown a week later somewhere else. You can't say, this Tuesday's Valentine's Day, if that's going to be used a week later. And this is, how does this work technologically? Okay, so we've got 3 cameras here, right? You don't have to do that. You don't even want to do that. You do not want multiple cameras. You want one camera. Because one camera feels more live. Multiple cameras feels like a television show. So it's actually, you need some video equipment, but you don't need a lot. We record our 3, we have a Saturday night service and 2 Sunday morning services. And in the other campuses, they get the best sermon. Those sermons are not of equal quality. I wish they were. If I'm preaching, so I'll do better on Sunday morning than I do Saturday. People will give me suggestions. And when someone else is preaching, it's my job to sit in the service and tell them what to change. Before, even happened I tell them, you went 4 minutes over, your second joke did not work, you need to look at the camera more. When you look at the camera, you're making eye contact with the audience. Not with the audience there, but you're making eye contact with the audience at the other places. And then we do some editing. Maybe the second joke will get edited out on Tuesday, too. So there's some, there's a little bit of editing that goes on. There's a little bit of training of the preaching team that you have to do. Here's some other questions. Do you like the way we do church? If someone's like, oh man, I could do it better than this, those are church planners. Do you like to be given directions when you're told how to do something? What is your long-term vision? Now, I want to just shift and talk about leadership some, because the more leaders you produce, the more church planners you will get, right? And your entire leadership system is pivotal, because if you don't have a good discipleship system, you're going to have trouble getting small group leaders, because you get small group leaders from your mature believers. So if you're not moving people from immaturity to maturity, you're going to have trouble moving people from maturity to leadership. If you're not moving people from leadership to being leaders of leaders, you're not going to move them to being leaders of a church. So your whole leadership system is pivotal. Two key truths in this is, first of all, leaders produce leaders, right? You know, you can say, give me your curriculum, Jim. Just show me what you do at your church. This is what I want you to understand. You know, we are continuing the ministry of Jesus, right? This is the heartbeat of the vineyard. We are continuing the ministry of Jesus. And I think a lot of times when we say that as a vineyard, we think, what did Jesus do? He preached the gospel and he healed people. That's what doing the stuff is. And that's totally true. But, okay, so you know, Jesus declared the kingdom, and there's this inbreaking kingdom. And we quote all the time, we look at Mark chapter 1, verses 14 and 15, where, you know, Jesus enters Galilee and he says, the kingdom of heaven has come near, repent and believe the good news, right? That's like our capstone passage. The next verse, he starts gathering leaders. The next verse. So if you are doing the stuff, what is doing the stuff? Doing the stuff is reproducing leadership. You are not doing the stuff unless you are in. And what did he say? Come follow me. Now this is what is frustrating and challenging about this. But Jesus showed us how to do this. This takes an amazing amount of your time. You know? It's just life on life. And so at all times, it's like, who am I bringing alongside me? Who are the people that God, Jesus did not invest his time fairly, equitably in people. He strategically thought, I'm going to be gone in 3 years, I'm going to invest in this smaller group at 12 people, and in that group, I'm going to invest in 3 key people. And so we constantly have to be thinking, I mean, we're trying to change our mentality as a church to how do we develop a culture of leadership multiplication? How do we just infuse that in everything? But, so it's life on life, but then you also need a clear track. So it's kind of it's kind of a paradox here, because I just told you, well, it's not about, it's life on life, but then also it's very helpful to have a clear track. And it's one of the things I probed in my doctoral research. I asked these 3,000 small group leaders, one of the questions was, our church has a clear track. If they did, they're a clear track for new Christians, a clear track for new members. If they said yes, those small groups produce more small group leaders because people want a clear track. And this is the crazy thing. If you do not give people a clear track, someone else will. Amway will. Or, someone will come to you and they'll say, I'm thinking of going back to grad school. I'm thinking of, doing this leadership course at work. Many times, I'm thinking of going to law school. Many times, that's because someone believes in their potential more than you do. Do you see what I'm saying? Someone is saying, there is this inner desire in them to excel and to move into greater things. It's this God-given thing inside them. And if you come along like Jesus came along, and, these guys are fishing. They probably have, and their dad's probably saying, you can take over the business someday. And, they're probably, okay. And they're probably thinking, is that all there is? Do I want to be like Dad 25 years from now? This brought up Peter and Andrew and James and John, And Jesus comes along and says, come follow me. And this is the challenge, is seeing people through Jesus' eyes so that we see the potential in them that they themselves do not see. And we speak that out, and we call that out, and we invest time in them. Like Ricky here. Ricky came to us a few years ago. Can I talk about you, Ricky? And Ricky applied to be in our internship program, and we rejected him. But somehow I was in the interviews, and they're like, Jim, you need to be in this interview. We try to get 2 or 3 pastors in these interviews. And, Ricky was going through some tough things, and it wasn't the time for him right then. And you just been following Jesus for 3 years or something. He's like, I want to be a pastor, and I'm going to quit my job. And I could just tell, this guy's got a long ways to go, but this guy's got potential, And so I said, hey, I'll meet with you once a month, Let's just get together once a month. Everything I told you to do, you did. I'm like, you need to be in a discipleship group. And he's like, okay, how do I get in one? And I'm like, well, you can't be in mine, it's already going. I did. I'm already doing 2, at that time. I'm like, take 2 of your friends, meet with them every week, here's a book you can use. He took 2 of his drinking buddies, started a discipleship group. Mark came to Alpha. It's just like God's working in these guys' life. Ricky's full-time on staff now. That's because of what he did. It's just, but I had to have my antenna up. In the midst of rejecting him from our program, he later did the internship program, And Ricky is doing a fantastic job. He is in charge of our pastoral care program. He's mobilized a whole team of people that visit people and pray for them in the hospital, and he trains them. And actually, we have like a better system there than we have had in over 30 years because of what he's doing. But we constantly have to like just kind of be watching what's going on. God, what are you doing in these people's lives? And then strategically investing. And actually, like with Ricky, I made a very small investment at that time. We just met monthly. But then, because I could see that he was teachable, and he was following through. Now, if he hadn't been following through, there's plenty of people. You know, if you start working with somebody and they're not doing what you're suggesting, and I mean, just don't waste time with them right now. I'm not saying they shouldn't be in a small group, they shouldn't be getting care, but they're not the people that you as a leader should be investing in significant ways right now. Okay, let's talk about a leadership track. I have in your handouts there our 10 steps to leadership. These are Happy's 10 steps to leadership. The saying at our church, God loves you and Happy has a wonderful plan for your life. This is not something we give out, this is not something we show at membership class. This is not, but when people, like, I want to be a leader. Somebody called me on the telephone as we're driving through Ohio on Thursday. And they're like, I want to be a pastor. Can that be, is that person called to be a pastor? Probably. I know that God is calling them to something much greater than they have right now. And they're like, I know you haven't seen me around much. We kind of fell out of church last year, but we're back. And I'm like, well, tell me what ministries you've been involved in. And I'm like, and I know the person, they're not totally unfamiliar to me. We say hi, I know their child's name and all this stuff. But I asked her, have you guys led a small group? Oh, no. So I wasn't sitting down with her. If I was sitting down with her, I'm like, here are the 10 I gave her this over the phone. I'm like, the next thing for you is to be a small group leader. Have you guys been in a small group? Oh, yeah, we were in Joe's small group last year. That was a great small group. But then, our van almost got repossessed. It was just, so she's like telling me this whole thing. And I'm like, well, that's great. You need to, and then I'm just starting to run her through those things. You guys need to go. She's like, we're going to Kingdom Healing, which is our learning to minister like Jesus renamed. We're going to Kingdom Healing on the 29th. I'm like, that's great. I said, you need to go to Encounter God retreat June 16th. And she's like, well, I want to be an intern at the church. And I'm like, well, first, I said the internship is to take you from being a leader to being a leader of leaders. First, you need to be a leader. So this is really great. You know what? You're sensing God calling you to, and this is great that you're going to this. Now, you just need to plug in and move into leadership. Do you see that? You just make this really clear. So you take this. I don't know if I think this is on the blog site. I think I stuck this up there. If it's not, email me and I'll put it up there. So what's your track? You need a track. And as you can see from those 10 steps, your small group system is your primary leadership training system. Okay, let's get into some logistics. I think I've covered everything on that page. Why multi-campus? So, This is like this is the next session, okay, or session 5. I've covered some of the stuff, so I can just hit some high points here. You know, why is the quality of our new campus, why is it higher than our original campus? And I was at the Sullivan campus, and I mean, this guy came up to me and just said, "Thank you for starting a vineyard in Sullivan." And he said, I don't know, maybe some of you know the guy, but he's like, I used to live in Columbus, and I went to some big churches in Columbus. I don't know what churches he went to in Columbus. He said, but what I like about the Sullivan Vineyard is it combines all the positive things of a large church with all the positive things of a small church. He said, you guys have great worship, you have great kids programming, but this is personal, and I know the people here. And I feel connected to this church in a way that I never felt connected at a large church. So you're combining the strengths of a small church and a large church. Okay, I've talked about these results, but let me show you some of the graphs on this. Before we started multi-campus, 24% of our people told us before coming to the Vineyard, I had not gone to church in the previous 6 months. Since then, across our church, it's 28%. Okay? So now we're reaching, so those new people that have come in, you know, it's not been 28, it's higher, or it wouldn't have raised our average that much. This is what it is at the other campuses. Okay, it's 27 at Urbana, it's 35 in Danville, 31 in Sullivan, 32 at Paxton, and then another 25% say, well, I was in a church, but I wasn't actively involved in that church. Some of them aren't actively involved in the Vineyard either, you know. But over half the people, you know, either had no connection or a minimal connection. So what do you need? You need a campus pastor. You need a small group core. And again, in Danville, we just had one small group, but we had to build the small group core in that time leading up to the launch. But in the other places, in Sullivan, we had like 8 small groups there. In Paxton, we had 4 or 5 small groups. But we will not launch until we know, okay, we're going to have a small group core there. We're going to have somebody to run children's ministry. We're going to have somebody to run a worship team. And I forgot to share that with the Danville launch. We were scrambling. We're like, we did not have a worship leader. And, you know, I mean, we had a launch date set. We're like, this thing's coming at us. And, you know, the person that we thought, well, they were a good guitar player, but they could not build a team, and they stepped out. We had planted a church in Indiana that left the Vineyard, okay? And it's a long story, but the team that went with that church planter went to start a vineyard. But by this time, the church had a couple hundred people. So when the church planter left the vineyard, the team left it. The team left that church. This is like crazy. People that sold their houses, quit their jobs. But that worship leader moved to Danville and became our worship leader. And he's actually we're actually in the process. It looks like he will plant a vineyard next year in Valparaiso, Indiana, another community in Indiana. But anyway, we had to move him, and you need money. It takes money, and I think I've got a breakdown there in your notes. But we've done this 3 times now, and we're doing it again. And it takes us about $25,000 of audiovisual equipment. It takes us about $5,000 of children's furniture. And then we typically have to renovate rented space. That's pretty much. I actually finished with some time for question and answer. I've covered a lot of ground here. What question do you have that I didn't answer? Yeah.
I think you said the Charleston site, 60 miles away, you didn't really have any established small groups there. So that
No.
leader is there established.
He's working much like a church planner.
Okay.
And he's networking. You know, we are an alpha church. We do alpha in a big way. Very few vineyards, a lot of vineyards do alpha, but we do it it's very important to us. It's run by the senior pastor's wife. You know, we've done it for 15 years, baptized hundreds of people. And we always do alpha building up, and we typically use the videos in that. But he's had to network and gather people, and it's funny, as he seeks to gather people, people come. But it's often it looks extremely random. Like he talks to these 20 people, and 10 people show up, but they're none of the 20 that he talked to. But this one person that he talked to tells these 2 people, and they come and they bring people. And the draw there, in that town, there's different things in different towns. But in Charleston, there's really no healthy Holy Spirit church in that town. Now in Sullivan, there were some Holy Spirit-oriented churches. You know, if we had looked and said, is there another Spirit-filled church here in town, we wouldn't have started in Sullivan. There's even a brand new one there. But still, we knew we had something to offer that nobody else had to offer. Yeah.
So he's a pastor, and he's proved,
Yeah.
So are you waiting for something? You've already got the launch date?
We've got and this is what we're looking at.
Okay.
We want a team, and basically we're watching, okay? So like a year ago, it was like him and his wife and a couple people. So he's got like 30 people now. So you go on Sunday night, there's maybe 25, 30 people there. That's counting kids, okay? And teenagers. But, you know, I'm watching more what's the direction of it. Like, okay, things are moving in the right direction. And then we look and we're like, we have a great worship leader there. He was not a great worship leader a year ago. But our other worship leaders have been working with him. And he's been leading worship at other campuses. And he led at Danville last week? Yeah, how'd he do? He did great. Yeah, that's what Dennis told me. And actually, just to meet him, just kind of comes across as insecure, not real talkative, but he gets on that stage and he just does a fantastic job. But he's been developed into a great worship leader. He was a good musician, but he's been developed into, and then we look at, is there a children's ministry director? And we're like, okay, those pieces, if those were not in place, we would not we would not have set a launch date. But this happens. When you set a launch date, it gives you momentum. And we've seen this repeatedly. People are like, oh, they are serious. I am going to invite my friends. And we get the same thing a church planter gets. We have people like, when you start, we'll join. I mean, there's some people that they're not going to join, but they'll join once we start. So we know there's some of those. But I just, Tim's like, I don't know, will we have 100 people there the first Sunday? Will we have 150? What's success? I don't know, but I think we can get at least 200 there. That's just my gut. Yeah.
Yeah, a pretty fundamental question. I'm a little confused. Do you tape just the sermon, or do you do the whole service?
Just the sermon.
Just the sermon. Okay, so then you would have to have, when you say worship team, you'd have to have all that set up already. Okay.
Yeah, and so the things that we don't have there that we're going to have to put in place there is we're going to need a ministry team. We're going to need a welcome team. So there's work to be done. But again, it's different than a church plant. We're going to be in there. We will do the training. Tim will not have to do those trainings. We will do the training while we're doing this summer. So this is a university town, and we want to gain momentum in the next 6 months. There's like 3.5 months there where that town clears out. I mean, the university is bigger than the town. And the people that work in the town work at the university. But we're going to do healing meetings. We haven't done this for over 20 years, but we used to do healing meetings to plant churches. We're going to do healing meetings in that town. And then someone stepped up and said, can I run a youth group this summer? They're running a youth group for 6 weeks this summer. So we're putting some things in place to at least maintain momentum. I think we can build momentum over the summer. Yeah.
Two of the main areas you've talked about is making sure a good quality or children's ministry and worship. Does a worship team necessarily mean that you've got to have a full band, or does it just mean a good quality worship like we had this morning with a djembe and a guitar?
We tend to have 3 or 4 people up there. I was at one of our church plants about a month ago. This is a plant, not a campus. And they had one guy up there. The last time I was there, they had 2 people up there, and he's playing the guitar, singing, and playing bass drum. With an electric pedal. But actually, the drum player might be 15 years old. But we'll have a decent band up there. Yeah, we tend to, and that's the hardest part, especially bass players and drummers. But we might send a drummer from another campus. And even now, I go to a campus, there might be somebody from another campus on one of the instruments there. Am I missing something on that? No. Yeah, Ross, do you have a question? Yeah, go ahead.
We started a campus 6 months ago, and we're a mobile church. We're setting up each week in a school. And all of your locations were permanent right from the beginning. I just wondered your thoughts on that at all.
The cost?
Well, not the cost, but one of the things
mobile?
Because
you need a setup team and a teardown team.
Right.
And we found in small towns we can get property really cheap. And I think it's helpful. We would have considered mobile church if we'd had to do mobile church, but we found property really cheap, and it saves us that. But there's an expense in that. You have expense in mobile church too. So maybe it's not that, but we have the renovation expense. Whereas you just have the sound system expense, and then then you need those, that you might have 1 team or 2 teams Yeah, so I've never done mobile church.
Yeah, one of the challenges we find with a mobile church is that the wear and tear on your equipment is tremendous right up the get-go. But then another thing is we've already grown to an average of 125 a weekend, and we're in a small community, so now to transfer into a building, it's going to be really difficult to find something that would accommodate us without building.
Do you do one service or two?
We do one to start with, and we actually have a community meal each week, so we could do an expansion and move to 2 services.
I probably go to 2 services because that immediately gives you, it's an immediate plus for your volunteers, and it just immediately doubles your space. So, you know, like this building that had 600 people Easter Sunday is 5,400 square feet. So they're doing 3 services in 5,400 square feet. It's really crowded. I mean, they're losing people. But it's amazing to me what they've been able to do with 5,400 square feet by doing multiple services.
Depending on how you do mobile too, for other people that may be considering mobile, when we've looked into it and talked to some people that have done it well, you know, their costs still are, they're not 60 to 70,000, but they're still coming up on 20 to 30, sometimes 40,000. If they go with like the easy way to do it, which would be like portable church.
I see, yeah.
You know, when you buy a whole trailer that everything packs in nice and neat. I mean, I've done mobile church setup and tear down when you do it yourself, and there's a lot more wear and tear on the equipment. But if you do it right and you actually buy from a company like that, it gets up there. By the time you buy everything, buy 200 chairs, and it's all packed and engineered to go in, you know, 20 minutes or something, just right. So it can still be expensive doing mobile church. And what Columbus Vineyard has done a mobile site, grew, and then now they just got into a building within the last 6 months.
The sawmill.
So there was another.
Well, and what I was talking to Stephen Van Dopp there, and he said the school was running out of money. They raised their rates. He said it was cheaper for us to move into rented space from a school. He said their primary motivation was to save money. Yeah. Yeah, Eric?
On the multi-sites, we have our main campus and we have the multi-sites outside. Can you kind of explain to them a little bit how the financials work between the main site and the multi-sites and the benefits of that?
So every campus, including now the main campus, so the main campus goes by the same rules now as the other campuses. It didn't initially, because at first we just adding some things onto it. But now the main campus is on the same rules. They operate basically on 60% of what they take in. 10% goes to missions and the National Vineyard, church planning, and 30% goes to central support, which pays my salary and the senior pastor's salary, and the people that support the campuses. So like communications and IT. And there's people now that work part-time, like Vicki works part-time, 1 day a week, helping all the campuses with assimilation. And then we have youth, children, worship, and small groups. People helping the campuses, but the time-intensive one is children. Making sure that that's going well. Okay, we're up on 11:30, but should we do a couple more? We'll just do 2 more questions here, yeah. And then I want to pray a blessing over you.
Okay, Jim, if I caught what you said right yesterday, I believe you made a comment about if the Sunday service is operated in a small group manner, it would stay small.
Right.
Could you expand that out just a little bit on what you would define as
the
a small
most
group?
common mistake that I see church planners make is they start a smaller service, and since it's smaller, they can run it more like a small group. It's a big mistake. It is not a small group. That is not what people need, but it will never grow beyond the size of a small group. Let me share from our college ministry. So we had a college ministry. I mean, we're right next to this huge university. For years, we did not have a college ministry. And then, somebody would come forward and say, I'm going to start a college ministry. And they'd start it, and they'd run it like a small group. It would never get beyond 30. So another person comes forward, and then it would kind of die, and then somebody else would come forward. So another person comes forward and says, well, I'm going to start it, and I don't, he's like, I don't like the traditional way of doing this. Not, I'm trying to talk to him, but he's got his own ideas. And, he puts the chairs in a circle for the young adult service on Sunday night. I mean, they already have small groups. They They don't need another small group. And, but, he just doesn't get it. So, same thing. It just ends. And more people were coming to his small group than would come to and we have like 7 college small groups. But his own small group, he would get more people at than we would get at Sunday night. So Jeff Heitkamp goes to start. Jeff's now at the Mercy Vineyard in Minneapolis. And I'm like, Jeff, do not do this again. We've made this mistake over and over and over again. That is a different experience. It's a worship experience. So Jeff's like, okay, he gets this. It grows to 175 because he does not run it like a small group. If this was, let's say we ran this like a small group, there's not that many of us here. This cannot work like a small group. We cannot have a sharing time. We cannot have a testimony time. If each of us said how our week went, we would be here for a day. And this group would shrink to 15 people. What am I saying is different? What I'm saying is different. If you look in Acts 2:46, says they met in the temple courts, thousands of them, and they met from house to house. They experienced something very different. And you can make the same mistake. You can make the small group like, let's have great worship. Let's give a sermon in the small group. There's people that do that, especially if they're Baptist. That's their grid. This is a Sunday school class. I'll teach. I'll preach. That will kill it. That's not the purpose of a small group. People they think they need great worship in the small group. You can just stick a CD in. You can just use a worship DVD. You don't even need a guitar player. That's not the primary place for that. So I don't know if that's helpful, but it's a very common mistake because you think, well, we're small. We don't even have to do it like a big church. If you don't act like a big church, you won't become a big church. That's fine if that's your vision, but don't wonder why it doesn't become big. It's because you're acting, and it's partly this, like Jeff was saying, you bring a different expectation and you act in a different way depending on what you're expecting this thing to become.